Thanks, back video.
Yeah. This looks so yellow. I need a different backdrop. Yes, he's gonna be a bit.
Well, that's true.
Meeting to order. This is the Board of Zoning Appeals for City of Westminster, Tuesday, May 7th.
When you speak, all the way to the right bound on the 16th o'clock. Just get that up. Okay,
So can try again.
yes.
Get an echo? No, okay. To start the meeting, we'll do some introductions. My name is Larry Brent. I'm Chair of the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Great, Vice Chair.
Brenda Frazier, board member.
Karen Rupp, Board Attorney.
Mark People, the Director of Community Planning and Development. Joe Atkins, Planner.
Everyone, I guess before our next order of business is a public hearing. It's case number 24-03. It's an application by Shepherd staff, the applicant, property owner for 30 Carroll Street, Westminster, Maryland. Thank you.
I'm here.
Okay, excuse my guiding mind here. Approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Have board members review the minutes? Any questions? Motion. Second. So I'll second. And all in favor, say aye. Aye. So,
Yep.
okay, now we'll go to the public hearing. Case number 2403. It's an application by Shepherd staff, the applicant, and property owner for 30 Carroll Street, Westminster, Maryland, zoned R 7500 residential zone and subject to the City of Westminster zoning ordinance requesting approval of a special exception for social club, fraternal organization, and community meeting halls pursuant to Article 7 R-7500 Section 164-36A and Section 164-30H and requesting approval of the following accompanying 3 variances. 1 side yard variance, a variance of 11 feet from the required 20-foot side yard setback pursuant to zoning ordinance Article 7 R-7500 Section 164-37C1. Also another rear yard variance, a variance of 5 feet from the required 50 feet rear yard setback pursuant to zoning ordinance Article 7 R-7500 Section 164-37C1, and a lot width variance, a variance of 38.5 feet from the required 100 feet minimum lot width pursuant to zoning ordinance Article 7 R-7500 Section 164-37C1. Before we start any testimony at this point, we have some exhibits. I think that we have to enter. I don't know whether Karen or Joe or Mark, you have them to enter.
Probably best for staff, since they're the ones that are familiar with everything, to enter the exhibits in the record.
Yeah.
So we have 10 exhibits for tonight's meeting. They're on page 2 of the staff report, but I'll go through. Exhibit 1 is the zoning determination letter dated July 18th, 2023. Number 2 is the Board of Zoning Appeals special exception variance application dated November 11th, 2023. Number 3 is the pre-hearing statement dated March 7th, 2024. Number 4, exhibit 4 is the justification authorization explanation dated March 7th, 2024. Exhibit 5, Randy Bechtel's authorization letter from Grace Lutheran Church dated March 11th, 2024. Exhibit 6 is the JMN Engineering Report dated March 26th, 2024. Exhibit 7 is the plat to accompany the BZA application dated April 3rd, 2024. Exhibit 8 is the proof of advertisement newspaper and posting sign affidavit. Number 9 is the public comments. And exhibit 10 is the Board of Zoning Appeals case 24-03 staff report dated May 7th, 2024.
And if I might, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could you ask if anybody has an objection to entering them?
Does anyone have an objection to the entering the exhibits at this time? There may be others later, obviously. These are ones. Get in.
Thank you.
Seeing none, I have just, I think, one clarification here in the exhibits. Going to, the application for public hearing before the Board of Zoning Appeals, which applicant filed, on the, front of the first page of the application, the request for variance box was not checked. But, the accompanying documents, clearly, discusses the 3 requested variances. So unless council objects, I'll consider this proper notice to the public. Seeing none. Yeah, again, for those of you who don't join us very often, our order of evidence will be the applicant testimony, the city staff testimony, supporting testimony, and groups opposing, individuals opposing, other group persons seeking to testify, then rebuttal and serve rebuttal testimony, which is mostly for lawyers. So that's the order of business tonight. Any questions so far? Okay. Then we'll start with the applicant testimony. I wrote it down. Okay, anybody who's going to be a witness, please raise your hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Okay. Okay, now we'll start presentation by the applicant.
I'm Brenda Meadows, the Executive Director of the Shepherd Staff. I started with the organization in 2009, became the director in 2012. Shepherd Staff is a privately funded, non-denominational Christian organization serving Carroll County since 1991 and serving from its current location since 1994. We are located at 30 Carroll Street in Westminster.
Good evening, everyone. Randy Bechtel. I'm located at 150 Airport Drive, unit number 4, Westminster, Maryland 21158, employed by BPR LLC. I'm carrying 3 hats tonight. I'm representing Grace Lutheran Church, the owner of the property, the engineering company. Land surveyor who prepared the documents for tonight's meeting. And if need be, performing an expert witness testimony.
Stacy Dowling, I am a licensed attorney, member of Grace, with a board member of Shepherd Staff. The Shepherd Staff is applying for a special exception for a social club fraternal organization and community meeting hall. Did you want me to read through all the variants?
I think we've already read through the request. We just need, I guess, the testimony to support your interpretation.
I'm sorry, I've interrupted a lot tonight.
That's okay.
Has everybody else here had a chance to read through the variance and the application and all the supporting documents that were submitted?
mean, other than.
I get- Yes, yes, just because, if the public had not had an opportunity to review it, you may want them to go through the criteria that's in the written documents, but everybody's shaking their head that they, yes.
We don't have a packet. We didn't come prepared. My apologies. Is that packet that everybody has, does that come from here, or is that something that we should have brought with us?
Right down, I think. Joe's grabbing it.
Here's what copy.
I mean, it wouldn't hurt to hear from them.
I don't mind reading it.
Okay.
So again, we're applying for a special exception for a social club fraternal organization, a community meeting hall. Pursuant to Article 7, R 7500, Section 16436A, and Section 16430H, and requesting approval of the following accompanying variances. A side yard variance, a variance of 11 feet from the required 20 feet side yard setback pursuant to the zoning ordinance, Article 7, R 7500, Section 16437C1. A rear yard variance, a variance of 5 feet from the required 50 feet rear yard setback pursuant to zoning ordinance, Article 7, R 7500, Section 16437C1. And a lot width variance, a variance of 38.5 feet from the required 100 feet minimum lot width pursuant to zoning ordinance, Article 7, R 7500, Section 16437C1.
And then just to address something that was brought up in the opening statement, Shepherd staff does not own the property. Grace Lutheran Church is the property owner. And they are joining this, obviously, and Randy's representing Grace, but Shepherd staff is allowed to use the property from Grace.
Do you have a formal leasing arrangement or?
They do have I don't know how formal we would call it, but there is a lease in place, yeah.
Also, while you're talking, I notice that you have the use of the church's parking lot.
That's correct.
Now, is there any formal arrangement with that? Any lease or written document that would support that?
Not at this time. There is an general understanding of the council of the church and the board of directors that they have use of it. Very acceptable. Just a little bit about the property itself and the history of it. The building itself dates back to somewhere in the range of 1909 to 1919, somewhere in that period of time. The church purchased the property in 1987. It was operated there as a tenant house until 1993 and 94. 1994 is when Shepherd staff was formed, and they began use of property to this today. I think as part of the package, you probably have a plat. Will be answering questions. I brought along some of your photographs for the publisher for you folks to kind of just description of where the property is. Wish everybody told me notes that.
All right, go interrupting, yeah. And is this one of the exhibits already?
I'm not sure about the city exhibit.
Okay, so we would accept that as the next exhibit.
You guys say this.
Exhibit 11.
Oh, that's just a blow up of what's already in the packet. So I don't know if that means it needs to be an extra exhibit. Karen, did you hear that? Karen, it's just a blow up of what's already in the packet. So
Okay.
so it's not a new exhibit. It was already included in the packet that you got.
It was in the staff.
That's in the staff report, yes.
Page 4.
Yes, thank you. That's just blown up wording to make it easy on some of our eyes to see.
Thank you.
Tell a little bit about what a typical day is at Shepherd Staff and what happens there.
Well, we use the property for.
Yes,
Okay. So since 1994, we've used the property as a privately funded, non-denominational Christian outreach and support center, whose mission is to reach out to those in crisis, to aid those in need and support those in trouble, to seek out and encourage pathways to self-sufficiency, to be a witness for Christ in our community. A typical day for us consists of distribution of personal care essentials and emergency food, interviews with guests in crisis, some looking for financial assistance, which could be rent, utilities, car repairs, gas vouchers, driver's license, scrubs, educational certificates, funerals. We strive not to duplicate services that are happening at other agencies in the community, although we will provide the services if family is above the poverty level and is needing assistance. In addition, we have some visitors come for guidance and mentoring, and some just need someone to talk to. We also distribute seasonally appropriate in-kind items like back-to-school supplies, new coats, Christmas stockings, and Easter baskets. So our days and hours of operation are administratively, our staff and volunteers are on site Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from 8:30 to 5, and on Wednesdays from 8:30 to 5 as needed. Our hours of operation for our guests that we serve are Monday, Tuesday, Friday from 10 to 2, and Thursday from 3 to 5. And by appointment if folks are working and cannot make those hours, and that's that's an exception. Exceptions for the hours that were noted above are seasonal distribution, which would be our in-kind programs like Easter baskets and Christmas stockings and back to school. And those actually would just fill out those regular hours of operation, so that would be 10 to 5 on those weekdays. And our hours of operation and the church's hours do not overlap. As far as staffing goes, we have 1 full-time staff member, we have 4 part-time staff members. And on average, we have about 3 to 5 volunteers each day. In the event that we're prepping for an event, there may be a few more people on site, but most of the time that's done off site anyway. Predominantly, the folks that we're serving are 99.9% in Carroll County residents. The exceptions of that would be someone that was in Carroll County that was trying to get down, and we may help them do that. The majority of our guests visit by appointment throughout the course of our hours of operation. And a high number for the number of folks that visit at any one time during the day would be about 4 folks, 4 families. As far as activity on site, we've had to scale back activities and services and change the way we do business because of the lack of space. And we've restructured how it is we do this business, and the way we've done it since we operated on site since 1994. We've had to retool our daily operations, and we're now serving guests by appointment, and we visit homebound guests. Both reducing the number of guests, both of these reduce the number of guests on site. In addition, we partnered with off-site locations to assist with distribution. This has helped take some of the burden off of Carroll Street and our location there, and we plan to continue to serve in this fashion. Saying that said, we're out of space and we're currently using space normally set aside for those who would be serving in the program. So folks that normally would be coming into the house, we're now having to find alternate ways to meet with them. On a daily basis, the things that we're doing is distributing personal care essentials and meal by appointment. We're hosting guest and client interviews, mentoring folks by appointment. We're distributing gas, laundry, prescription, clothing, and food vouchers by appointment. We're distributing school supplies, Easter baskets, new coats, and Christmas stockings by appointment when those programs roll through throughout the year. We've also partnered with sites around Carroll County to help with off-site distribution to keep the traffic down. We have locations around the county, Union Bridge, New Windsor, Eldersburg, Tonytown, and other locations to take the burden off of those folks from having to come to Westminster, and also the burden off of Shepherd staff in the Carroll County Westminster location. And we've had to discontinue accepting and distributing in-kind clothing and household donations because we no longer have the place to store that because we're using our distribution place as program to prepare for our programs. We also prepare for our fundraising events on and off site. We're not as efficient as we could or would like to be because of space constraints, the continual rotation of items from off-site locations, and an inaccessible attic and basement at hours and safety concerns to which would be alleviated by a new building. The building has outlived its usefulness from the perspective of safety and efficiency. Just a very few more things, our customers mainly walk or use local transportation services like CATS. Some drive. There will not be anything greater, as from a lighting perspective, we'll not be using anything greater than what would be used for residential property. And prior to filling in this application, we've not been approached by any of our neighbors with a complaint.
What are the percentage complaints on record with the city of Westminster that were provided to us?
Is that, are you talking about the lighting or?
No,
No,
in general.
In general, any complaints, not specific to lighting.
The property is pretty unique in nature in terms that yes, it is in the R75 zone. It's in the historic district zone, and it's not in a car trust or a labeled historic building. We had gone through the historic commission, through the city of Westminster's historic commission about that report. I think that's part of what was presented tonight is one of the exhibits. It's kind of unusual that it's pretty small in size, narrow in size. One of the reasons we need the setbacks is that the property is only, as it sits today, only 61 and a half feet wide. The building itself, the proposed structure will look very similar to the structure that's there, but will be longer, will extend back paralleling the parking lot. But the front facade of the building will look very much from the street like it does today.
Could you give me a little more details about the building in terms of the footprint? Are the sides and the front going to be on the same width?
For all practical purposes, yes. We have moved it, one of the reasons for the one setback closer to the parking lot, which would be on the, I guess, the south side, the parking lot side, is to get it away from the 32 Carroll Street property, a little further away from there.
We're trying to shift it over a little bit. If one side is the parking lot that Grace owns, and then the other side is the residential house. So we're trying to move it closer to the parking lot and farther away from the
Do you
residential.
have any rendering of the building?
Not slightly, yeah. You have one, Brittany?
So we're tearing this down and building a whole new.
Yes.
That's correct.
Like it was true.
That's what led to this request.
Yeah.
Well, I was just saying, along this line. What, do you know the footprint, the square footage now versus what you're asking for? Anybody, Paris, take a look at the documents,
And these would be exhibit 11.
We're for all practical purposes double in size, but we'll now have a full basement, full first floor, and full second floor.
I believe square
I
foot.
believe you already have a full basement and a full second floor.
I believe square foot is 14 million currently.
Have they been sworn in?
Yep, we raised our hands.
I did a double.
testimony
So-
about to give, will it be the truth?
Yes, sir.
All right, understand.
And
Just make sure before you leave to sign up on the widgets.
Can I ask a question? I'm looking at this. Are there dormitories in here?
No.
Any kind of overnight?
No, we're not doing anything differently than we're doing today.
It's a floor layout.
No plans to do anything different?
And here you can see, we're planning to use the second floor, we're using the basement floor. So there's no plans for any dormitories or any overnight stay.
One main question I have is obviously the current building and what you're showing us here. It doesn't look like a meeting hall. And the staff has indicated that, I guess, to the special exception would be for a community meeting hall. And if that's the case, it would change the nature of the use of the building, but what you're showing me here is, you know, it's going to be more of the services that, you were talking about before. So I don't know, are you adding any services or meetings or?
That determination came from the zoning determination presented earlier.
Right.
Mark, could you answer that question?
What?
So the special exception considering in a meeting hall, was that just the best bucket to put it in?
We did a zoning determination, so the uses that are operating there today, with that zoning determination, determine that this is a community meeting hall.
As
So
is
this-
currently, that's what.
As it currently operates, so if we're applying that use, so essentially they can continue to operate today as a non-conforming use. Because it was determined that the use that exists has been there, and is an allowed use in the R7500 zone. By tearing the building down and redeveloping, they lose that non-conforming status, so the new development is subject to the special exception application. And as long as the use is similar or identical to what was previously operating as, it would still fall into that zoning determination as community.
And so this will eventually have to do a planning. Well, correct?
Yes, we had the planning commission, that site plan review for the planning commission, and if you've noticed in the staff report, staff made it clear that residential occupancy is not part of a meeting hall. Drug or medical treatment is not part of a meeting hall.
Yes, and that's not, we're not expanding the scope of the services, we don't do any of that. There are enough facilities in this area that handle that, we don't overlap with other. One of the things that we try to follow is to make sure that we provide what we provide, and we're not overlapping with somebody else's services. And we've never done any of those things, and we have no intention of ever doing any of those things.
But if they were, that would be a different use, a different process to establish those activities. This use before the Board of Zoning Appeals tonight, that is not an activity that is allowed.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to finish my part of the presentation here a little bit. There'll be a full site development plan prepared and processed through the city of Westminster, through the county agencies that the city gets to review. One particular thing right now, there's no stormwater management on site. Through the site development process and the new construction, we'll have stormwater management on site. We'll have landscaping on site. The plan is to put up some screening between our neighbors here that are here from 32, right? 32. Some screening down there for them. So that was the reason we're just trying to move back away from their property a little bit.
How much further back from their property will you be?
Whatever it is, there you go. 11 feet, the 5 yard.
Meeting the zoning setback requirements on the 32 Carroll Street side. So they are not asking for a variance on that side, the other 3.
Yes, the variance is so we can go closer to the parking lot.
Okay,
So we can move farther away from them. That's not an issue. The variance isn't an issue on the side.
okay.
But currently, the building that exists there today is about, I want to say 5 feet from the property line shared with 32. So essentially, the new building would be additional 15 feet plus further away. And in compliance with the ordinance on that side of the property.
And we've been talking pretty much about special exception, but if the discussion is going into variances, my concern is reading this, city code on variances. It's very restrictive in terms of what our authority is really to, grant variances. In other words, the property had essentially, the property has to be almost unusable unless the variance is granted. The problem I have is you are currently within the current footprint able to, use the property, but what you're asking for is to go basically twice as large a building, if not maybe vertically, but also the footprint is going to be large. And I have a concern that granting a variance for the new footprint, particularly since you've been using the property now for this, you say you're not changing your services. So if you didn't change, if you either knocked down the building and put up one of the same size or just used it as is, you still have the use of that property. To expand it, to expand it means you're going beyond the current use of the property. And therefore, I'm trying to say this. To expand it really would be to say that you couldn't use the property under its current condition, which is not the case. So my concern, I guess, in our deliberations is, what type of variances and what size of variances is this board able to, to give them, given the fact that to grant a variance is means that the property was unusable prior to granting that variance, or essentially unusable. So that's my concern here in our, in our discussions with the variance. I have lesser concerns about this special exception.
So are you coming at that from the perspective of services that are provided?
No, it's just the.
Well, essentially, right now, we're not able to function in the space where we are, provide the services that we need to provide.
But you could, yes, but you could be using that same facility and provide service, so that they would be restricted, but you still could use the property.
I mean, the same size, not the same.
Yeah, same.
But the facility, that size facility would allow us to do what we need to do, because we're currently not able to do that today. We're expanding so that we can do everything that we need to do on site. Right now, we're meeting with guests out on the picnic table in the backyard, or we're meeting with them on the front porch to hand them supplies, which is not who we are or who we want to be. There's an aspect of dignity, compassion, respect in what we're doing.
No, I understand that. Again, I'm looking at the code, the code. Really, what you're discussing is your inability to have a use or expand your use. The variance goes to the fact of whether the property itself is usable in any fashion whatsoever. And in a variance, you have, the applicant has to show that, maybe the property is too narrow, maybe there's a setback requirement that you just want to, expand on, because you can't, you need a variance for a swimming pool, for example. If we granted a special exception for a swimming pool, you might need a variance on your yard to have a swimming pool. In your case, you already have the use that you have with the footprint that you have. And for us to grant a variance beyond that, I'm just raising the issue whether, as a board, whether we can do that.
I think it's a practical difficulty of the fact that the lot's only 61.5 feet wide. If we, I think about that up here. I think that's the real practicality of it, and it's typically, fairly unusable even with the current footprint, if we were to reconstruct. We could not reconstruct on a current footprint because we would not meet typical setbacks.
Well, I understand that, but to expand the variance is my question. And maybe I should be talking to the council at this point. Whether we can grant a variance, can we grant a variance under the current footprint? And can we, if so, are we allowed to grant a larger variance? Because again, my feeling is they want to expand the use, but not the, beyond the current footprint. I mean,
No, because we want to expand the use, we just want to expand the size of the building because of the fact that right now, there are parts of it that are unusable, so. In terms of the attic space and the others, I mean, we're making do with what we have, but. We're not trying to expand the use of our expand the services, and maybe that's wrong.
And the space has been dictated to us. And we've tried to work within that space, but it's not efficient nor feasible.
I mean, it's even just a matter of trying to get, it's an old house, it's a.
no,
Well, no, what I'm just saying is in terms of post-COVID and the way we have to operate just to be safe in terms of space and everything else. We're just looking for, bigger room size just to have people where they're not on top of each other, things like that.
It's back to the lot width of 61 feet wide. I mean, it's a practical difficulty to maintain even the current building. In a rebuild of the current structure, we would still need a variance.
but it would be. Council,
So to your point, 61.5 feet, you're saying is too small. So what are the side yard setbacks? What is the normal width of a lot in the 7,500 zone?
100 feet.
Okay, so this particular property is roughly, I'm not really good at math,
Like
but roughly
39.5 feet
right?
more narrow than the typical.
Okay. So I believe what the chairman is saying is when you're looking at the special exception, you're looking at the use that you propose for the property, right? And so you have applied for a special exception. That's something that the legislative body has said is acceptable in this zone, provided it doesn't have any greater negative impacts at this location than it does at another, right? The second aspect of your request is the variance, and under the variance requirements in the code, it is your burden to prove that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property, not the use, but to the property in question, or to the intended use of the property that do not generally apply to other properties or classes of use in the same zone. And that would be your argument about the width of the lot.
Correct.
Such variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the same zone and in the same vicinity. And the authorizing of the variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent properties and will not materially impair the purpose of the chapter of the public interest. I didn't mean to put words in your mouth, Mr. Chairman, but I believe that's what you were trying to say is that it's the what is it about the property? And that's what you got to with how wide a 75, is it usually 100 feet? Is that what
Required to be 100 feet. So essentially they're losing 40 linear feet of buildable land that if they had that, we wouldn't need the variance.
Correct.
Right.
So it's outside the variance now.
It's
It's outside the variance now as it's.
you improve the north side is within 15 feet into the setback, so that's been eliminated, so. You're moving the building further away, eliminating that need for variance or making that side at least conforming to the ordinance. It's flipping to the other side where they're asking for an 11-foot variance, which is still less total variance than as it exists today in the northern side.
And that property is owned by the applicant.
Correct.
Yes, the property they're getting closer to is owned by the same property owner.
Yeah. If you look like here,
Right, so we're trying to move it, see how it's close to here,
Yeah.
this line here, we're trying to shift it over here, so we're towards the parking lot and away from, I think, your house.
So the parking lot is actually owned by Grace Lutheran. It's
That's
my
correct.
understanding that's also the owner of 30 Carroll Street. So I'm
Correct.
not sure that the parcels are even split as in you're talking about, is the lot size the whole thing, or you're saying parcel A versus B? Are they not all the same parcel? That
They are not,
is the variance, is it 100 feet or is it 60 feet from the parking lot? Like the parking lot went over into the property at 30. Carroll
They
Street.
built the parking lot, you mean?
Yes.
There are two separate parcels. There's one parcel with Shepherd staff existing on today that's 61 feet wide. The width of the parking lot might be 100 or in that. So, but that's not what we're looking at today. That's not where the use is being applied to. We're only looking at this property, 30 Carroll Street.
So the parking lot is completely and wholly
correct,
located on this
On a separate
adjacent
parcel.
property.
Yeah.
yes. They're separate deeds, they were owned separately.
It's in the plan.
So a question for council. In order to even have a building which is roughly the same size as the current one, we would have to still grant variances. So if we can do that, then we wouldn't have any problem legally having a larger footprint or larger variance.
No,
No.
not if you determine that the variance is necessary and that it meets the criteria. And there's case law that addresses the fact that when you have a special exception and variance request together, that's fine. You just can't vary the special exception requirements, and they're not seeking to do that.
I'm comfortable.
And Vice Dr. Scott might have had a question.
The city developed a neighborhood like compatible zoning category at one point in time, which allowed for the development or redevelopment of substandard lots within Westminster. Is that only applicable to residential? Or is it also applicable to other zones?
It would, you could apply it, I believe, to the R7500. They'd have to go through rezoning application for that. It's not a guarantee that they would gain that approval. It helps out a little bit with the setbacks. It's primarily for redevelopment for higher density, to try to gain some additional density downtown.
So with it being zoned R7500 residential, what has it been for the last 30 years? What has it been under?
R7500.
So it's been acting in not coordinates with the city?
So when the ordinance was adopted in 1979, that's when we took control of uses in the city. If a use existed prior to 1979, and it's continued to operate, even though it's not an allowed use today, it can be deemed legally non-conforming. In this case, meeting hall is an allowed use in the zoning district. So the use isn't in question. The use is allowed by special exception at the property, but being that it existed, it was deemed to be able to continue to operate.
The property itself or the organization
The use, Shepherd's Step, the use itself.
prior to 1979?
We look at prior to 1979 or when it operated,
Well, didn't they start in 94?
but we also look at past, we look at past use, and it's hard to explain, but the county was actually doing some review for the city during this time as well. So we look back at what past uses used to be, how it continued and how it continued to operate. We take that into account as to whether they continue to operate. But in this case, the primary discussion was the determination, is this use allowed at this property? And yes, it is, as a special exception.
Yes.
Mark, just add to that, this is also called a non-conforming lot in the R 75 zone because of the lot width.
Yeah, so, so it's a a lot, most of the parcels around this area are non-conforming lots. They do not meet the standard width setback requirements that the ordinance today would require.
If this lot was used, pardon me, as a single family, it wouldn't meet the lot width requirement either. Single family lots required to be 7 feet wide.
So currently not, so the current use, the current property is not conforming in several factors. It has a setback, it doesn't meet the setbacks on the one side. I think it would need a 15-foot variance to make that conforming, where I think this application is asking for an 11-foot variance. And on the other side, obviously.
But that's real typical of the Carroll Street properties, most of them are non-conforming.
Yes, everything downtown, that's a standard thing we run into. Property downtown, don't meet parking on site, as you can imagine, the building takes up the entire property, it's within setbacks, it doesn't meet landscaping typically, so it's not uncommon that current development does not meet the zoning ordinance, particularly downtown.
I think our house is probably the only one, because we used on 2 lots. I think we're the only one on that street actually for the size you're talking about.
And some people did that, they put 2 or 3 lots together so they could
Yeah.
build larger homes or rancher style homes. But
Yeah, like any lots on like the whole thing, I think we have the largest.
So this will be coming further from your home.
Yeah.
Any other testimony that I asked?
I think we
Just need to identify yourself. What's if they test them, she's the they already.
There, so these, I said they should sign. the sheet.
Then my only point, we were playing telephone here. My only point was that when somebody speaks, they should identify themselves for the record, so we know when we go back through to write the decision and everything who it was that was talking.
Sorry, this is our first county meeting, or city meeting, whatever you
I
call
hope
it.
it lasts, right?
It's more to get some clarification on like the use, mostly for us, it's the use of the. That was our biggest clarification that we were trying to get.
Do you have any other questions of the applicant at this point?
So you said that the usage, just because for my own benefit, because I'm hard of hearing. The usage as it is now is not changing in any way, shape or form, is that correct? With no plans in the foreseeable future.
Correct.
To change in any way, shape or form.
That's correct.
I think our biggest for the being it rezone or the special accommodation was that. It being used for different services than it currently is zoned for. That's what I mean, if you grant that, and then if they go forward, they'd be approved for. Extended use for like, we were afraid of like overnight housing mostly was that was our biggest concern.
My understanding is we wouldn't be though, correct? I mean, if we tried to do that, we would still be in violation of the,
Yeah.
of the special.
Yeah,
Anyway.
that was our biggest
But
concern.
irregardless, we have no plans of having any overnight. There are already wonderful organizations in this community that do that, and that would be a duplication of services of which we're not interested in doing.
And one thing I wanted to clarify from reading your letter, this isn't a rezoning. It would still be an R 7500 zone. It's just different, instead of being a non-conforming use with a rebuilding of the building. They're asking for a special exception within the same zone.
Okay.
Residential zone.
And your names for the record?
Christopher and Samantha Steele, Cromwell.
Shall we try the staff report at this point?
Wait, are they didn't finish?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm just presenting, we have other letters of support that were sent to us, so. Yeah.
It's given.
Betsy wondered.
Exhibit 12.
This would be exhibit 12. So letters of support.
It's community letters of support, it's a variety of people.
That's the one on the street.
You don't bring it up here.
I mean, the big thing for us is. again, to address sort of that, we're not looking to expand services or anything. As it stands now, we are 100% privately funded. We do not take money from any government organization, city, county, state, federal, anybody. Everything comes from private donations. We have very small staff. We're continuing to operate with a very small staff. We have no, we're just looking to have a safer space to use it. We had a inspection and structural engineer come in, and the building's not safe as it stands right now. There's a lot of issues with that building, and so we're just looking to have a new building, safer space, and within the footprint that we have, but try to be more efficient and serve the guests that we have better.
I think probably we should also, I guess, well, we have you here, we should go in and ask you to go through the criteria for a special exception. I know you've done that in writing. I guess maybe I'm satisfied with the answers given, but I think we should go through as a board. Council, should we have the staff report?
Unless staff is gonna go through it.
Let's let staff do it. Our procedures have changed recently, so.
we're not gonna go point by point over the conditions, for the, I think we were looking at just possible rebuttal, or if there was some clarification to provide. I think we've stated in the staff report hasn't changed. One of the primary issues, I think, was the actual use. We wanted that clarified, and I believe that was clarified. But I would recommend that they do go through at least the conditions, the grant of a special exception, and make those points. And also, I don't think we're really, I think we should work towards the special exception first, because we still haven't hit on all the requests for variance in the discussion.
Okay.
That would be acceptable. We take one at a time, essentially. If that's what, Karen, if that's fine with you. So I think we'll just wrap up the special exception discussion and having the conditions of special exception.
Okay. So the code provides that the board may grant a special exception when it finds from a preponderance of evidence of the record that the proposed use does not adversely affect the general plan for physical development of the district as may be embodied in this chapter and in any master plan portion thereof. Proposed use of the location selected will not adversely affect the health and safety of residents or workers in the area, overburden existing public services, including water, sanitary, sewer, public roads, storm drainage, and other public improvements, or be detrimental to the use or development of adjacent properties or the general neighborhood, or change the character of the general neighborhood in which the use is proposed, considering the service required at the time of the application, population, the density. So obviously it's not going to change the character of the neighborhood. We're keeping the structure to look as it stands. We've operated in the location since 1994, and the majority of the activities are held outside church hours. Many of the clients walk to the location or utilize cabs, and the services are the same. Actually, less public services will be required to operate the new facility. One, because we'll be building a state-of-the-art building, which will be significantly more energy efficient as it is now, than it is now. And also, as Randy pointed out, in terms of our site, we're doing the on-site stormwater management, because we're required to do that. And then also implement a safety plan, which we don't have currently as well. So all of those things will obviously contribute to actually bettering the location and lessening the use of the services. So obviously we're not changing, again, the character of the neighborhood or increasing anything else, because we're staying within the uses that we've already used since 1994. There's no change to any of those.
Could you, I know you haven't generally addressed it, but could you, one of the questions was parking and traffic. The additional traffic and parking, could you address that?
Yeah, so the parking and the traffic won't change because, it actually it could go down, but basically it's going to be the same as it has been. And parking wise, we only use the church's parking lot, which is we currently have access to, just right next to the.
You say the hours that you use are not the same as the church.
That's correct. There's really no overlap except for the church staff that's there during the day, but the church services, we don't operate on weekends when church is in session. The big fundraisers and things we have are off-site fundraisers, we don't hold anything like that. And it's all timed with our during the day services, so.
Does staff have any problems with the parking as proposed?
No, ultimately, they'd have to go through a site development plan, they'd have to demonstrate, and the parking lot would be part of that site development plan as well, to demonstrate that parking is allocated specifically to Shepherd staff. And for the hours of operation, that would be, so that would be all handled like site plan.
Yeah, most of the church operations happen in the evenings, and the church is open to other community organizations, but those are in the evenings when we don't operate, or weekends when we don't operate. So we have a lot of that.
You said there's no additional information that you're going to get.
No, sir. So of course, we'll enter the staff report into the record in its entirety. I think most of what has been covered with the special exception is adequate. Staff doesn't have any real concerns with what was proposed from the applicant. Again, I think the concerns that we heard from the citizens and the residents and what the applicant has stated, that there will be no overnight housing there whatsoever and no drug rehab there. Basically, the services that they provide now are going to be the services that they provide in the future. There won't be additional services.
And staff has recommended that, that be one of the conditions, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And no overnight and no drug rehabilitation.
Yeah, so just when you go through, you read the staff report, there's the 15 criteria that should be considered. I'm not going to go over each of the 15 criteria. The applicant provided their response and we provided our response, and we're in agreement with most things, except for that the uses, as we have a lot of conversation about that just recently. So jumping to page 18 of the staff report, which is the conclusion and additional consideration. Again, I think this requires two separate motions, one for the special exception. And then once when we talk about the variance, we'll come back and make a motion for the variance as well. But on page 18, pursuant to the zoning ordinance, section 164, 170B, the applicant for a special exception shall have the burden of proof, which shall include the burden of going forward with the evidence and the burden of persuasion on all questions of fact, which are to be determined by the board. The zoning administration finds that based on the findings, conclusions, and recommended conditions of the staff report, the staff requested community meeting halls special exception pursuant to zoning ordinance 164-36A and section 164-30H complies with the zoning ordinance and has no objection to the conditional approval of the Board of Zoning Appeals special exception case 2403, subject to the following restrictions. And then there's three four. Yeah, there's one on the next. Yeah, sorry. So just to go briefly over the grant of the special request for the special exception does not relieve the applicant from meeting zoning ordinance requirements or obtaining necessary approvals from the City of Westminster as outlined in the staff report. The applicant must attain necessary water and sewer allocations from the Department of Community Planning and Development, and a community meeting hall should not provide residential occupancy or medical drug clinic or treatment.
Any other, I guess in order to be, what we need to do, I agree with you, Joe, that we ought to separate this special exception from the variances. So I'll take, let's just deal with the special exception at this point. Is there any other discussion, any other questions from the applicant, the staff, board members? What we'll do on the special exception is close the hearing and allow the board to discuss and make any motions on. So just on the special exception itself.
I wanted to ask and I definitely wanted to say something, but I wanted to ask how it went from a non-conforming to a community hall use. How does that happen and what does that mean?
It was that.
It was a zoning determination, so the zoning determination was essentially the uses that exist there today is that considered a meeting hall. Zoning determination said yes, that the uses operating in Shepherd staff would be considered a meeting hall under the zoning ordinance.
And so what was described to you as in to come to the meeting hall determination?
It is, a non-denominational social service organization where members of the community gather for group activities, social support, public information, other purposes. And that activity was considered a community center or meeting hall use.
So I think that I would like to start my testimony now. My name is Jill Garver. I live at 29 Carroll Street, lived there since 2007. And we're opposed to the special exception for the meeting hall at 30 Carroll Street. I think first I'd just like to kind of start with, I think this is how the meeting started. It's like that the property at 30 Carroll Street is owned by Grace Lutheran and leased to Shepherd staff. These are separate entities. Shepherd staff has their own board of directors, is privately funded. The zoning should consider the land and the zoning ordinances and not the leased use of the property. The lease at the property at 30 Carroll Street could be revoked by the landowner. I didn't even see on here a formal lease agreement. Having lived opposite Shepherd staff since 2007, I think it's a little bit lofty and possibly inaccurate that they're being considered a community meeting hall. As evidenced by the 30 Carroll Street property and structure report, there's minimal room for any meeting space. Think that the term was supportive care, support center. They're not functioning as a community meeting hall. They're a storage and distribution building. Any future community meetings up this 30 Carroll Street are a change or an expansion to the leasee's operations. In fact, it's rare that the public is actually allowed within the structure. I believe there's a picture within the property report with the chain front porch. I don't necessarily know that I think because an entity has been done it this way for years, doesn't mean that that use or the special exemption is correct, especially at a leased property. The other thing I would say is that we did hear that the square footage is increasing almost double in size. So the application potentially, I'm not sure why it's not considered a new use instead of grandfathering a non-conforming use. I think that the kind of implications to the neighborhood, if we've learned the services may not expand, but will their range of customers from Exhibit 10, currently it's 2,000 households, 5,000 individuals. Will that be increasing? Is that increasing traffic? Is that increasing just people that are coming there? I think that the other piece, a lot of this kind of like the parking issue. Exhibit 9, I put in a listing of kind of everything that happens in the church on a daily basis. There are other activities that happen during the day, during the time when they're sharing the parking lot. I think that the other piece I would like to just mention is that the leasee and Grace Lutheran Church conflate their entities when it suits them. As separate entities, the property should not have a zoning determination based on the leasee. As one entity, it seems slightly redundant to have within 60 feet to have an exception for like a place of worship and then this meeting hall use. I would say that they didn't meet the burden of proof for this exception. We're opposed to the exception. However, if it is approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals, I would kind of add on to some of these provisions that the staff report had. I would add on provision for the limited business hours that they already said that they kind of have. Kind of mentioned earlier, it's daytime, some days not even open. The other provision I would recommend, or kind of that the board could impose, would be a time limit to the provision. That this exception does not convey to any other leasee, nor does it transfer upon the sale of the property. Those provisions are within the zone of Board of Appeals authority, and I think this would protect adjacent properties, the neighborhood, and then the residents. We want to grandfather and continue as is. Those provisions to the exception would help to cement that.
Do you have any, do you have anything in writing other than your, I know you did.
Yep, I did the pre-hearing statement. This
Yeah.
is just in response to the
Yeah.
pre-hearing statement.
Any other testimony at this point? If I hear none, then I think I'll make a motion to close the hearing and a discussion by the board. Second. All in favor, say aye. Okay, the testimony has been closed at this point and discussion by the board. One thing, one of your points, which I don't have a problem with, is limiting the business hours, does that cause a problem for you folks?
Half what they already are.
To what they,
What they already got, yeah.
are we talking about staff on site or are we talking about serving guests? I would say.
I would think a termination hours for public to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, public.
It needs to be different than staff.
So I think we need to clarify the comment about the 2,000 and 5,000, those, in terms of serving people, those are cumulative numbers, they're not, I mean, that's over the course of a year, that's not like monthly or weekly or whatever, and some of those numbers are reflected in the fact that our, like our back to school supplies, we provide school supplies to about 2,000 families every year. But that's very limited time frame. This isn't like 2,000 families coming through on a weekly basis to affect the traffic or parking or anything like that.
And
So
500 of those would be distributed offsite at Tonic Dam and Newlands.
that's why we opened up offsite locations, which the offsite locations are still going to continue so that we can serve the full county and not. So we have shifted things to try to reflect that. I don't think we have a problem with keeping, as long as the hours can stay what they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's simply a.
We're not
in the
staffed,
future, but
I mean, we're not staffed to.
Yeah, we're not
No.
staffed to,
What are you've given us the testimony of your public hours have.
yeah, our public hours are Monday, Tuesday, Friday, 10 to 2. And Thursday from noon to 5. Right
The
now,
staff is there longer than that.
so their hours we serve, and actually in the past, we have been open on Thursdays from 3 until 7. And that may be a possibility again, because what we're trying to do is meet with families. We'd like to keep families working. So if we can meet with folks after later after work, we would like to continue to do that.
And that's,
have that option.
and that was done in conjunction with Grace Lutheran Church because they have a soup kitchen meal on Thursday evenings. So we were staying open to provide services to those folks who work coming to get a meal at the church at that time.
I would go better about, I guess I understand the hours, but I also believe that there has to be some leeway in the services that they provide by putting those exact hours in. Now, maybe it's something like an 8 a.m. to 7 is their only hours they can operate on a daily basis, during the week, something like that, I think would give them.
Yeah,
A happy
and
medium.
they can change it
Correct.
within the framework. Also,
Make those hours open.
I'm also concerned that there's no written lease between the church and.
There actually is a written lease, it's just not a very good one.
We do have what's involved.
And I actually wrote a additional lease because that's what I do for a living. And so we can present the board with a lease if you need it.
So I have a question, just because it wasn't something we thought about until she spoke up. Say that lease were to end and the church were to sell that property, what happens then? Do they have to conform to this?
It goes with this,
Yeah, it runs with the
yes.
land.
It's with the property, not the owner.
Yes.
Okay,
But only for a period of time.
Yeah,
Right?
that's-
The use would lapse if it was
Yeah.
no longer used for this after a period of time.
Without a special exception, now it stays with the property.
Saves the property.
Yeah, but it's any
Once it's
condition, any conditions that are that the special exception is subject to stays with the property. If they ever wanted to alter them, they would have to come back to the Board of Zoning Appeals to change any condition that you're applying.
So you couldn't sell it and become a residential facility or
Correct.
drug
None of that could
rehab
happen.
or any of that stuff. It would still have to be.
What's that citation or what's that reference?
The city code. No, actually, it's general property law. I mean, in the state and almost every state that, I think probably every state in the union. The special exceptions under the land, that means wherever, if it changes ownership. That goes with the land and any other restrictions or, opportunities, whatever.
So it could stay with the land as in Shepherd staff, the leasee changes and moves to a new location. Grace Lutheran is still a landowner. They could do some other type of community meeting center because they are the landowner.
As defined by the special exception. They'll have a special exception under specific subsection, which is the community hall. Community center.
Yes, and so is that going to Grace Lutheran or is it going to Shepherd staff, the leasee?
It's not relevant. Leasing ownership, it's a use. So just generally speaking, you have, every property has a zoning district as a residence would, and you have permitted uses by right uses, and you have these special exception uses. Special exception uses are still uses that are acceptable in that zoning district. It just might have a certain impact that the board then takes under consideration if that use is appropriate at that particular property. So the use is being established. So now that special exception use of a meeting hall is what's being approved, not Shepherd staff meeting hall, just the use of a meeting hall. That's the listed use in the ordinance is being accepted to be a use at this property.
and that,
So it runs with the property. This is your single family house. You want to sell it and somebody else would go, oh, I lost my power. I lost my ability to have a house. No, if that house is always a house, just like the meeting hall gets approved, it's always a use that would be able to be established at the property, subject to the conditions that the Board of Zoning Appeals sets up.
So
that's the special exception here, right? It would follow that guideline?
Yes. So Shepherd staff was to leave. Against that meeting hall is still an allowable use as decided by the Board of Zoning Appeals, and any conditions that they apply stay to that property, to that use.
So if there's a 8 to 7 weekly public hours, that would stay with the land as well.
Okay.
Any other questions from anybody? It's been kind of a loose meeting, but I think
Well-
it's been productive.
One more, Ben Gardner, 29 Carroll Street. You said you had inspections done for the property.
Correct.
Did you do lead base and asbestos, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, Neil did that. It did.
They did a thorough inspection of everything.
Yeah, it was like a 65-page report, so. they-
Is that something that can be, or is that, I don't know how that works.
So it's in one of the exhibits. It was provided to the Historic District Commission when the demolition permit.
Yeah, so it's probably on record with this,
It's on the website.
you can get it.
If it's like ours, I know it's full of lead.
Hence the reason to.
Yeah, 100%.
Again, I'm going to close again, to speak. The testimony here, I'll try again. As I say, it's been formal, but I think it's productive. So discussion amongst board members.
I think we just think about our
Yeah.
conditions.
Now, we're talking special exception only at this point. Okay. Variance comes.
Second.
So this. So I would entertain a motion on the exception or the special exception. Want to do it?
No, I don't want to take a shoot. You've been doing so well there.
All right, I guess the motion would be, and we will help council here. A motion to grant a special exception as a is it a community center? Is that the
Community meeting hall.
community meeting hall? Grant a special exception for the community meeting hall. And with following conditions that that the applicant does not relieve the applicant from meeting zoning ordinance requirements and obtaining necessary approvals from the city of Westminster as outlined in the staff report. 2, the applicant must obtain necessary water and sewer allocation from the Department of Community Service or Planning and Development. 3, the community meeting hall shall not provide residential occupancy or medical/drug clinic treatment. And 4, that the business hours open to the public would be 8 AM to 7 PM on 7 days a week, right?
They're not open now, so.
It's not 7, is it 7 days? Did you say?
Well, So you never want to be open on a Saturday?
Yeah, I think we should probably include Saturday.
Yeah, Sunday we
Going
don't.
forward, it would not be.
Sunday we would.
Sunday.
Okay, so it'd be
Monday through
Monday through Saturday, 8 to 7.
Are there no church services on Saturdays?
Evening, it's an evening service.
Mr. Chair, may I ask you to make a statement with respect to the section of the code that has the requirements for approval?
That section 164-36A and section 164-3H. Anything else I need to?
Well, I think there needs to be an affirmative statement that you find that the applicant met their burden of proof. And
I
if
didn't
it's
say
met the criteria for approval,
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Okay, as part of that motion, the board believes that the applicant has met its burden of proof and has addressed any conditions or concerns within those sections just noted and
Section 164, 169, the criteria for determination. And section 164, 170A, the conditions for grant of special exception.
What he said is that.
yeah, what he said. Council, are you okay with that?
Okay.
Mhm.
Has it been seconded? I'm sorry.
No, not yet.
Not yet. There's seconds. Waiting for a conversation. Okay. Second. All in favor, say aye. Okay. So the special exception with the conditions and limitations has been approved. Now we want to go reopen, testimony concerning the requested variance.
And Mr. Chair, may I ask that you incorporate all the testimony that was provided relating to the special exception into the variance, so nobody has to repeat themselves.
Okay. Along with you on that one, so we'll incorporate all of the testimony and exhibits contained in the discussion for the special exception, which has just been granted by the board. I'll open up the hearing to discussion of variances. I know that there has been some discussion previously, some testimony by the applicants, so I'll open it up to you if there's additional testimony that you want to give on the variances. Staff, do you have any discussion on the variances requested?
I think again, it'll be, I'd recommend that the applicant address the 164, 161, A3, the three variance criteria. I know we talked a little bit about one, but there are two others I think it will be worthwhile to have the applicant provide discussion. Staff did have a question about one of the variances, the rear yard variance, and the question essentially was why the building couldn't be moved forward because there's some gap or some space before you get to the front property line or the front setback. That could alleviate the need for the rear yard setback. So maybe again, I think it'd be worthwhile again for the applicant to go through each point.
The staff makes a good point with respect to this, since there are three variances, each of the criteria needs to be addressed as to each variance.
Okay, can you read the criteria?
So 164, 161, powers and duties A says that the board has the authority to, upon appeal, authorize variances from the terms of the chapter as are necessary to avoid arbitrariness. So that the spirit of the chapter shall be observed and substantial justice done. Such variances shall be authorized to the board only upon the finding of the board that one, there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes of uses in the same zone. Two, such variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the same zone, in the same vicinity. And three, the authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent properties and will not materially impair the purpose of the chapter or public interest.
And we start on page 16 of the staff report.
So the applicant will address each variance and each of the story criteria.
I think we talked about the width, the side yard setback.
Can you identify which variance you want to address first and then
Side yard variance of 11 feet from the required 20 yard setback. I think we talked about that for. Do we have any further questions or comments anybody you guys had from that?
So we asked for that because we're already. The lot itself is not compliant in general, we don't have enough setback on either side. We asked to move it over.
That's towards the parking lot.
That's correct, that's towards the parking lot to get it away from.
Yep.
Our neighbors at 32 Carroll Street. And closer to the parking, but then we don't meet the setback on anyway, but so we're trying to get that. To move it.
And if you could direct you to exhibit 7. It shows the proposed plat, it's your other document. You can see you can see the approach here, it's just the setback.
I find it.
total about 700.
So we're talking about the first variance here. Say, tell me again the requirements here because it's already,
So we're already non-conforming.
you're already done.
That's correct. So we're trying to move it closer to the parking lot side to at least be conforming on the side of the property that borders 32 Carroll Street, which is their property.
Can you address the second criterion, which is variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of the substantial property rights possessed by other properties? Then you're talking about the one variance.
For this, for the side, yeah.
I'm gonna go through each variance and go through the criteria for each variance.
Okay.
We're talking about basically nine discussions.
So basically, in terms of that, we're trying to actually make their lot better, so we're farther away from them and they can enjoy their property. Really only our neighbors that at 32 that are affected.
And the criterion is the authorizing such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent properties. So will not materially impair the purpose of this chapter or the.
Correct, so I mean, we're trying to better the setback on the side of 32 Carroll and the other side is a parking lot and there's no detrimental effect to that.
Any questions on this particular variance on these three criteria? Okay, the second variance is the rear yard variance, a variance of 5 feet from the required 50 feet required rear yard setback pursuant to Article 7 R-7500 section 164-37C1 of the city's zoning ordinance. So again, if you could speak to that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to this property question or intended use to other property that does not apply generally to other properties or classes using the same thing.
The concept layout of our proposed new construction. In order to meet a lot of the American Disabilities Act's criteria, that 5 feet makes a lot of difference. At the end of the day, we may not put the building there, but we're here tonight asking that because in the beginning, it looks like we may need it to meet ADA requirements.
Second requirement, such variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment the substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the same zone and in the same vicinity.
See no impact to the adjoining property owners.
That's the back against this 18th Street, correct? That
Correct.
little alley hill.
Yes, it's an alleyway behind it. I know there's no properties that are
Affected.
right.
Quite a
that happen to it.
distance, quite a distance to the other building.
And we were trying to keep the front. And we were trying to keep the front where it is to keep the same look with the neighborhood and not have it be significantly different from trying to shove it forward instead of going backward. The way the rest of the houses on Carroll Street are set up along that area.
Criteria. Authorizing such variance will not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent properties and will not materially impair the purpose of this chapter or the public interest.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, there's nobody impacted behind us and because there's an alleyway and there's no property bordering us behind. The alleyway separates the properties from Carroll Street and then the properties that actually back up to that alleyway, which are on John Street.
Is that a driveway that we see that's gonna be added in there? we have a picture here, I don't know if that.
Yeah, yes, it is, Chris.
Um,
It's access from the alley to the basement area.
now is that driveway just for staff or is that gonna be, my concern there is just how that alley is horrible,
This-
right?
Yeah.
So my concern there is just how much traffic is going up and down through there.
It would be for large deliveries,
Okay.
essentially.
Just for us to access the basement,
Gotcha.
because we're gonna be able to try to drive in. The idea for the basement is, because right now it's a basement of a 100-year-old house, so. But is to be able to have storage down there, storage that doesn't, isn't subject to heat and water and everything else. So for our programs like Festival of Trees and things like that, that we can actually store our Christmas
Gotcha.
stuff and everything
makes
there,
sense.
so, yeah.
Other comments, questions? Okay, the third variance request is a lot width variance. A variance of 38.5 feet from the required 100 feet required minimum lot width pursuant to Article 7 R-7500 section 164-37C1. The city zoning ordinance for the property located at 30 Carroll Street.
I mean, I think we've talked about this, but I can reiterate the fact that we're obviously at 60 some feet wide, where we don't meet the ordinance now. So even if we tried to rebuild the building in the same space, we would still need to come and apply for it because our lot's not wide enough. It's not the same size as most of the, well, actually a lot of the other lots aren't either, so. But it's not the standard 100 feet. So in order for us to be conforming, we need the variance.
Is there any questions or comments from the staff on any of these three variances?
I think it'd be worthwhile to explain some of the ADA. You mentioned that ADA was the reason for the variance, and I think a lot of that has to do with slope and ability to get into a building. I think that would be important to mention. What specifically about the ADA standards is causing that? And the other one, again, if the building seems like it's set back about 3 feet from the front property line, why can't it be moved up a little bit to lessen or possibly eliminate that rear yard setback? And is it, again, if that's because of the slope and the need to get access into the building, I think that would be important to highlight.
Yeah, well, the whole front of I don't know if everybody's familiar with the space, but so the way the building is set on, it's basically on a hill, it goes up. And so the whole front yard is actually sloped down to the road. So there's not, you have that issue with slope and steps and access that way, which is why everybody comes in from the side from the parking lot. Because that's flat and we're not subject to having to build up steps into the slope, which is what they said from the ADA.
So because of because of the front yard, that's what I'm gonna do, because the front yard, you're not providing access from the
Right.
front, you're going to the side.
Correct.
Because of that.
We have to because it's not handicapped accessible. And even for our guests that aren't specifically handicapped, it's still not safe for them to try to climb that hill to access the house.
So I think
Because of the slope of the front yard.
yeah, someone explains why they're going into that side yard near the parking spaces, because they can't really provide that front element or front access, the accessing from the side. I think that's an important element about the property uniqueness of it. That's forcing them to operate from the side, access and parking versus front of the house, front of the building.
Well, the property, it is the topography of the lot, that's everything we're talking about here related to that. And the building, the topography itself is flattened. It's a rise from the parking lot to the building. And shifting that building one way or the other, ADA has certain requirements, slope requirements, length requirements. And to meet those requirements, it gets pretty specific sometimes of where the entrance is, where you leave the car, park the car, get to the entrance door. And like I say, at the end of the final grading of this, we may not need it. But we're here to ask for it tonight, in case we do need it. Just at the preliminary phase, it looked like we may.
Anything else from staff?
That was all new information, that's why I was wondering why the ADA was important.
Any comments or questions or witnesses? No other questions, I will close the testimony and
Up to the variances.
do I hear a motion for, I think we'll make one motion for the 3 variances. Unless council has a problem with that. Do one motion for the 3 variances.
As long as you can articulate how they meet all 3 criteria for each one in the one motion.
You got it. Okay, okay. Let's try this. Public council, of course. In terms of variance number 1. The side yard variance. I make a motion that we. I guess I should preface it that I believe that the applicant, by testimony and by, I think some of the exhibits they have presented, have met the 3 criteria for the grant of a variance, side yard variance, as spelled out in the staff report. Is that all right, council? Do I have a second?
Second.
Favor, say aye. Aye. That's all, no, it's just for the one. Okay, the second one is the rear yard variance, of 5 feet from required 50 feet required. Rear yard setback pursuant to Article 7/7500 section 164-37C1 of the city of zoning ordinance. Because I feel that the applicant has addressed and discussed all of the requirements of variance of this particular type at the rear yard. I would move that we grant the variance to the rear yard variance as discussed in the statute. All in favor? Aye. Okay, and the third variance is the lot width variance, a variance of 38.5 feet from the required 100-foot required minimum lot width pursuant to Article 7R-7500. Section 164-37C1 of the city zoning ordinance for the property located at 30 Carroll Street, Westminster. Again, I believe that the applicant has discussed and has met the criteria either through testimony or through documents which they've submitted to the board, such that the board, I make a motion that the board grants this third variance as previously discussed. Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. So, having said that, all 3 variances have been approved by the board, with the special exception has been approved by the board. And
Sorry.
yes.
You had indicated or you had discussed something about the lease. Do you want the lease to be submitted and supplement the record?
I think yes. Yeah. I'm sorry, yes. If you-
And it be submitted electronically.
Yes.
Okay.
The requirement, working on that? Sure, I move that, yeah, I move that, as a part of the approvals, made this evening by the board that the, applicant submit the release, between Shepherd staff and Grace. So, I approve, all in favor, say aye. That's been a long day. No. So it's a 2-to-1 vote. Absolutely. Any other discussions from the applicant? Witnesses?
Thank you for your time, thanks for the.
Much, meeting adjourned.
And everybody who was here tonight, have you signed in so that you have your address? So that you can get a copy of the decision?
It was
You want a copy of the decision?
are they some point or?
Probably not till the end.